Artyom drove along a deserted highway, tired from a long day at work. Night had fallen on the road, and thick darkness covered everything around, leaving only a small area illuminated by the headlights. The radio played quietly against the monotonous hum of the engine, and the light of the headlights snatched endless stripes of markings and rare road signs from the darkness. Ahead on the side of the road, he noticed something strange. A figure. At first, it seemed to him just a trick of the light, but as he drove closer, he made out it was a man. The figure stood slightly leaning forward, waving one hand, as if asking to stop. Artyom involuntarily slowed down, peering at the strange traveler. The man was thin, dressed in a long, dark coat, which fluttered strangely, although there was no wind. "Help!" Artyom thought, hesitantly squeezing the steering wheel. It was wrong to leave someone on a deserted road at night, but something about this man made him doubt it. The figure's face seemed hidden in shadow, even in the light of the headlights, and its movements were slightly unnatural, sharp and angular. When he was almost level with the figure, the man suddenly froze, stopping, waving his hand. Artyom slowed down, lowering the side window. "Can I help you?" he shouted, trying to seem calm. The man did not answer. He stood with his hand down, his face still hidden, but it seemed to Artyom that the figure leaned slightly, as if peering straight at him. "Damn, what nonsense," he muttered under his breath. Not waiting for an answer, he decided to continue on his way. He raised the window and pressed the gas, gradually picking up speed, leaving the traveler behind. But the inner chill from his gaze did not go away. When he glanced back at the rearview mirror, his heart skipped a beat. The figure was still standing there, but now it was looking after him. It seemed closer than it should have been, although the car had already driven several dozen meters. Artyom tried to calm down, to convince himself that the figure on the side of the road was just a random traveler, maybe drunk or strange, but not dangerous. His car picked up speed, carrying him further and further along the dark road. Rare trees and bushes flashed past the windows, and the radio continued to hiss quietly, as if it was not tuned quite clearly. But soon he saw her again. The figure, the same one. This time she was standing at the next turn, a little closer to the center of the road. Now her dark silhouette was clearly visible in the light of the headlights. She did not wave her hand, but as soon as Artyom noticed her, the figure took a small step forward, as if inviting him to stop. "It's impossible," he whispered, squeezing the steering wheel tighter. It seemed to him that his coat was swaying strangely, as if it did not obey the laws of air movement. The headlights illuminated a face for a moment, if it could even be called a face. Instead of the usual features, Artyom saw something unnaturally smooth, without eyes, nose, or mouth. A black void in the headlights. Artyom sharply turned the wheel, trying to pass by, but the feeling that he was being watched did not leave him. He tried not to look in the mirrors, but still stole glances. The figure was no longer standing still. Now it was moving. Slowly, but persistently, as if it were simply gliding along the road behind the car. A few minutes later, he saw it again, ahead. It was standing right on the side of the road, this time even closer to the roadway. The headlights caught her figure completely, and this time it seemed to Artyom that she leaned forward slightly, as if she was about to take a step towards the car. "Who the hell are you?" he shouted, hitting the horn. The figure did not flinch, did not retreat. Its presence seemed to be pressing on him. He stepped on the gas, trying to get away, But the road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, and a few minutes later the figure reappeared, already in the middle of the road. Artyom braked, the wheels squealed, the car squeaked, and the road turned gravel. Ethan stood staring. From his viewpoint, the distances from the car to the body were obscured. Now the figure was so close that he could see its face, or lack thereof. It was emptiness, smooth black, like something absorbing light. The figure suddenly began to move slowly towards the car. Artyom, with trembling hands, shifted the gearbox, intending to turn around, but the engine suddenly stalled. "No, not this," he exhaled, frantically turning the ignition key. At this time, the figure continued to approach. Artyom desperately turned the ignition key, but the engine did not even try to start. Panic overtook him completely. He glanced at the road, but the figure was no longer there. It had disappeared. "What the hell?" he whispered, trying to breathe evenly. Maybe he had just imagined it. Maybe fatigue and the darkness of the night had played a cruel joke on him. But then he heard it. A quiet, barely audible sound. A rustle, as if someone had run their fingers over the upholstery of the back seat. His body was paralyzed with horror. He slowly, almost mechanically, looked into the rearview mirror. There was a shadow sitting in the back seat. It was close, very close. A black silhouette, in which there was nothing human, did not move, but something intangible, almost oppressive, emanated from it. Artyom felt an icy chill run through his body. His fingers squeezed the steering wheel until it hurt. He wanted to scream, but his voice got stuck in his throat. The shadow had no face, but he knew it was looking straight at him. "Go." A low, muffled voice rang out, as if speaking not with a mouth, but from the darkness itself. Artyom mechanically turned on the ignition. This time the engine started on the first try. He pressed the gas pedal sharply and the car jerked forward. The road now seemed endless, its boundaries blurred, and the headlights caught only endless stripes of markings. But he could not stop, could not even slow down. His hands were clutching the steering wheel. His gaze was riveted to the road, but he felt the shadow was still in the back seat. "What do you want?" he squeezed out in a trembling voice, but there was no answer, only the hum of the engine and the smooth noise of the tires. He did not know how much time had passed, minutes or hours, but the road never ended. It began to seem to him that he was no longer on the same highway. The forest around him disappeared, the roadsides became endless, and the sky was too dark, as if he was driving through a place that had never existed. In the rearview mirror, a shadow began to move. It did not lean, did not make any sudden movements, but its presence became stronger. Suddenly, the voice was heard again, but this time quieter, with an incomprehensible intonation. "Now you..." "What? No, no!" Artyom shouted. But at that moment he felt his hands begin to weaken their grip on the steering wheel. His head began to spin. His eyelids became heavier. The last thing he saw before his consciousness plunged into darkness was a figure in the rearview mirror leaning over him. When he opened his eyes, he was still in his car, only now he was driving along a deserted night road, and his hands confidently held the wheel. He did not need to know where to go. The road led him itself. There was no one in the back seat, but he knew he was next. Now he was part of this road, doomed to travel along it forever in search of new victims.